Hello again for this edition of not really sure what we're doing, but let's see what happens. Today I'm going to make you feel bad about yourselves. Hopefully not. It's going to be kind of a civics lesson. The kind of lesson that you weren't given in high school. I know I wasn't given in high school. I had to wait until I was old enough to go on the internet and look stuff up for myself. I'm sure I'm not the only person who didn't understand these terms up until maybe a few years ago. For some people a few weeks ago, some people still don't understand. If this is all beneath you type of knowledge, then feel free to disregard. For everyone who is not sure, let's go down the line of political ideologies. Politics is boring. It's only boring until it starts affecting your life directly. So let's talk about it. Do you have a political ideology, or do you simply vote for the candidate of the party that you like? I know a lot of people do vote that way. Maybe it's time to start thinking differently about how we engage in the electoral process, about how we decide what type of governance we truly want. Do you know that there are different types? For those who do not, let's go down the left and right, as it were. World politics is kind of in one of three realms. Usually, it's either going to be someone on the left. I'm going to refrain from using hand gestures because it's going to be backwards for you. So I'll just say left and right. People on the left, that's one ideology. People who are on the right, another ideology, and people who consider themselves to be somewhat in the middle, but not really, people who would classify themselves as libertarians. So I'm going to deal primarily with the two main sides of the political divide in today's world, which is the left and the right, and how they are similar and different from one another. Now, almost everyone bases their politics kind of like on the US model, so that's primarily what I'll be dealing with. Western civilization, a sense of democracy and whatnot, we all kind of have similar qualities, but I think the United States truly embodies the stark differences between the two main sides, so that's what I'll be dealing with primarily. Historically speaking, the Democratic Party has been on the left, and the Republican Party on the right. Now, people use those terms derisively sometimes to curry your favor for one group or the other. But there's no moral judgment on being left or right, only on the things that you do as a result of that. So I think that's important to point out right up front. So as far as government is concerned, just the general idea of government, people on the left typically want more of that. And on the right, less than that, less of that. What does that mean? People on the left would like it if government were responsible for more things in society rather than less. For instance, picking up the garbage, policing, military, in some cases, hospitals, medicine. They want government to have hands in more of those things. Utilities, electricity, the power, water supply. They would prefer the government were responsible for more of that as opposed to being responsible for less of that. People on the right think that if there's something that a private citizen can do more efficiently and better, they're better at than the government, then the government should have no hand in it. Of course, there are nuances with this. People who are way on the right and people who are very close to center, but basically on the right. So there's a spectrum, as it were, in between the two extremes on either side. But generally speaking, people on the right want less government. And they make, I will reveal my bias right up front. I'm certainly strong, hard in the right of the political, on the right of the political divide. And that's for several reasons that I'm sure will become apparent as I continue to speak. So, less government, people on the right, more government, people on the left. Let's look at something like regulation, i.e. government regulation. You may have guessed it that the left would like more of that. The issue of climate change is really hot right now, pun intended. Terrible pun, I know. But that's a good example to talk about how people on the left would like there to be more, much more government regulation in their attempt to control the output of mankind by legislating what he can and can't consume, thereby helping the entirety of mankind by saving the planet. That is at least the idea. People on the right want less regulation, from something as simple as climate change to something that's a little more complex, nuanced, like how much garbage is my factory allowed to dump in the river? Some would say less, some would say he could dump a little more. No one's dying yet, and what he's producing is more important for the community than the water supply right here. Valid points to be made on both sides. Healthcare. Now this is where we're going to diverge, because they're on the same page here, but for vastly different reasons. As far as healthcare is concerned, both the left and the right want more of it. More healthcare, as much healthcare as can be expected, but they have different ways of going about it. People on the left would be happier if government kept controlling more and more of the healthcare industry to ensure that everyone who needs healthcare gets healthcare. People on the right want government hands out of healthcare to allow the industry to grow as it grows. It will cost a bit more per person. Per person who's getting healthcare, it's going to cost a bit more, but in the long run, it provides you with vastly better healthcare services. It has been shown that government-run healthcare services around the world they're not the best, but at least everyone gets a piece of it. So there are arguments to be made on both sides. Hi. Yes, there was a break in transmission there. I do apologize. I had a terrible case of the munchies and had to stop for a bit to take a bite. And if you don't get that reference, good for you. Good for you. You are an upright, moral human being. But look around the room if you're watching this with anyone. If anyone smirked or cracked a little smile, okay. Where were we? Healthcare. We all want more of it. We just have different ways of going about getting it and getting the best of it. Liberty. Here is where they really diverge. People on the left, generally speaking, want the average person to have less of it. The person on the right, generally speaking, would prefer the average person have more liberty. But they also understand what that means. More liberty, more freedom means more responsibility. People on the right are, generally speaking, much more ready to allow people to be people and take responsibility for their actions. People on the left say, no, we should protect people from themselves. We should be proactive instead of reactive. We should make it so it's more difficult for people to not be the certain type of moral that we want them to be. And we're going to say it's for their own protection. Once again, you can hear my bias coming out. Protection. Generally speaking, people on the left and the right want more of it. But again, they have different ideas of what that means. People on the left would, ideally speaking, want the government. Now, people, and I hate when other people do this, just stop mid-sentence and speak parenthetically, but it fits here. People on the left generally complain about how bad government is, even more than people on the right. But their solutions are always more government. Well, this didn't work, let's just increase the budget. Because that has to be the problem every time something fails. You know, as the old saying goes, never met a politician who couldn't solve a problem by throwing money at it, as long as it was someone else's money. Okay, take that for what it is. So we all want more protection. But the people on the right say, I should be allowed to protect myself should the need arise. People on the left say, no, that's what the police are for, even if you don't live around a police officer 24 hours a day. Okay. Control. Generally speaking, the left wants more control, as in more control going to the government, more control about more and more aspects of your life, control over anything you can think of that would even remotely kind of affect another individual. They think the government should have control over that. And the right thinks that the individual should have more control over whatever aspect of their life they choose. Now, there are arguments to be made on both sides. For instance, the validity of real property tax. I mean, that's my land. Didn't I buy it? Didn't I purchase it? The whole legal question of what crown land actually constitutes and what it means as far as ownership goes aside, people generally think, I've already purchased the land. Why do I need to keep paying taxes on it? But of course, the government can make the argument, well, taxes pave the roads and put the lights on and keep your children educated, safe. Okay, well, there are arguments to be made on both sides as to exactly whose responsibility that should be. And if you'd like to care to make an argument for or against, be my guest. I would be happy to respond to it. Economic factors. Generally speaking, people on the left lean more towards what could very well be classified as socialism. And people on the right, very strong in the avenue of capitalism. Now, capitalism is not every man for himself. Capitalism is, some have argued, the more moral ideology as far as economic practices go. Because capitalism suggests that if I don't give you something that you want or need, I starve. At the core of capitalism, it's not just making a buck. It's making a buck in a way that the person who I'm making the buck from doesn't walk away feeling he's just been robbed. That's capitalism. Socialism says that there should be a small group of people, an actual cabal of sorts, who decides exactly what each individual citizen deserves as far as economically is concerned, and then they tailor everything else in society towards that. And the less you have a say in how you are paid and where your money goes, the further into the avenue of socialism, of the left, you are going. Again, you can tell my bias. I'm not even trying to hide it. Let's do a few fun ones now. Where do the left and right stand on something like abortion? Well, people on the left, generally speaking, as far as abortion is concerned, it should be free, bountiful, and without apology. People on the right, generally speaking, as far as abortion is concerned, no, you don't get to kill babies. As always, there are arguments to be made on both sides. But generally speaking, people on the right say no, no abortions. People on the left say yes. Sexuality. People on the right consider the traditional, the norm, the classic, if you will, to be one man, one woman. And we are not too non-self-aware to see the hypocrisy in not always adhering to that standard. Because many don't. But even the ones that don't still say, I'm ashamed for what I've been doing, but yeah, that classic, that should be the standard, that should be the norm, even if we don't practice it. Because we should at the very least have an ideal to aspire to. People on the right have gotten much more liberal about sexual topics in the past, recently, past couple of decades. There was a time when if you were on the right side of the political aisle, ideologically, you don't even talk about that. That's not a conversation to be had in public for any reason. That's changed. Now, is it going to go all the way to, you know what, sexuality is a spectrum? No, that is deeply rooted in the heart of the left. Morality. Generally speaking, it seems as though the left wants less morality, or rather less religiously directed morality, and the right typically wants more. So in that regard, you can say, because as I've heard it said, that the American Christian conservative right is very similar to something like Al-Qaeda or ISIS with religious dogma and ideology. There's an argument to be made for that. It's a dumb argument, but you can make it. Because there is no similarity when it comes to practice. Now you can argue theology all day long, but it is undeniable that Christian conservatives are not the mirror image in the West of, say, an Al-Qaeda or a Taliban in the East. That's a dumb argument to make. But I would be fascinated to hear you make it, if you would like to. So, religion. Did I cover that already? The left wants less of it. The right wants more of it. But not for legislative purposes. The right has stopped trying to legislate morality. They're now on the defensive. They just want you not to be able to legislate how other people interact. My, how the tables have turned. Good thing, bad thing, it's a thing. It is what happened. I think the right, people on the right, and people who consider themselves libertarians are pretty much securely in the same camp on most things. They will differ on personal morality, but they will not differ on what the government should be able to do about it. Generally speaking, less government is preferable. And on the left, as always, more government. So, how many of those did you identify with yourself as far as your own ideology goes? I would love to hear you sound off in the comments. And if you thought this video was complete drivel, okay, you can say that too. It hurt my feelings, but you could say it. As always, feel free to disagree. Here endeth the lesson.